We are live. What's up, everyone? We are Reason, religiously educated atheists, secularists, and other non-theists. Can I get a take two on that? We are Reason, religiously educated atheists, secularists, and other non-theists. Say that 10 times fast. AKA the Secular Round Table. You can check out our site at thesecularroundtable.com. We have all sorts of neat things over there, like Reason t-shirts. And there's my live stream kicking. Slacking tonight, fellas. Alright, so we got our Reason t-shirts that you can find over on the website. And we've got a couple new t-shirts coming out. We've got the Keep Calm, It Seems Legit, designed by the Prototype Atheist. We don't have a sample yet, but the other t-shirts look so good that you just can't miss this opportunity. Look at this. Designed by the Godless Engineer. Think skeptically and stay godless, with our little brand on the back there, Reason. We've also got the Rational Tea, designed by me. Ooh, look at that, baby. Radium, titanium, oxygen, nitrogen, and aluminum. Ooh! Science. So anyway, you can check out our site at thesecularroundtable.com, and we have a store over there where you can find these t-shirts, and you may find other great items in the near future, like this hat. Hint, hint. And also, we have a blog over there that you can check out where we report on some of the recent religious and atheist-related news. If you'd like to support our live stream, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/reason. We have a lot of philanthropy projects over there that you can check out on our milestones. And yeah, if you're just interested in supporting monetarily, you can do that. But ultimately, the best way for you to support is to subscribe to our channels and share our videos. And that, I'm pretty sure everyone else will agree, is the best way to support us. Finally, let's give a shout out to our sponsor, Atheist Box. The very first monthly subscription box designed specifically for you, yes you, Atheist Box. And they're all about promoting positivity and the understanding of science without bashing and trashing any specific religions or any religions at all. If that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, you should head over to atheismbox.com and sign up. Now, I got this spiffy little Bill Nye t-shirt, Do You Even Science? Love this shirt, man. And you can get that in the Atheist Box. And it ships out once a month for $40 a month. I heard they were also going to do a mini box for $20 a month. So shout out to Atheist Box for being a great sponsor of Reason. Now that we got that out the way, you know I'm Aeolus. I'm your host. We do this every week, Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern. We've got a new member to Reason, Dieter Lucum. Yeah, you can follow me at God Works Out. Or, you know, here on YouTube, God Works Out. I have an Instagram now, God Works Out. So check it out. I'm going to turn it over to the Godless Engineer so he can refamiliarize you with himself.
Yes, I am the Godless Engineer. I have been posting a lot here on YouTube, and I think that might be an understatement. I also have a fairly large Facebook page. You can go and find me there, Godless Engineering. You will find a page and a group. I would suggest you going in and joining the group. We just surpassed 10,000 members in the group, so we're pretty excited and stoked about that. I also have an Instagram if you want a more personal look at me, and I have a Twitter if you want to get in touch with me, or just because you do Twitter and Facebook sucks. And now I will hand it over to Brendan.
Thanks, GE. I am Brendan. I go by Prototype Atheist. You can find me on YouTube. I try to put out a video about once per week. And generally I deal with topics like religion, atheism, and science, and a lot of the times kind of where all these things come together. And I also do the Twitter thing. You can find me on there. A lot of times I'll be interacting with people with like creationists, trying to get them to understand evolution and things of that nature. And I also operate a Facebook page. You can find me there under the name Prototype Atheist as well, where you know, I just post interesting articles related to the same topics like religion, atheism, that kind of thing, sometimes politics. And, I occasionally will make memes once in a while and things of that nature. So, yeah, go ahead and find me at any of those places.
All right, I guess I'll go now. Hello, everyone. I'm Data Lucum, the one with the greatest hat. And I am a YouTuber. I also do things on Twitter and Facebook. My biggest shtick is I debunk various claims about anti-science. I respond to people's comments, and I just love arguing about stuff. I'm also finally this week going to begin the first iteration of my podcast, Godless Voices, which you can find on godlessvoices.com. And that's a whole nother thing. Talk about that another time. I want to get the conversation going, so that's all I got. Bye-bye.
Hey, why don't you go ahead and tell them a little bit about you real quick? I know we kind of did that a little bit last week, but just go ahead and since you're now a member of Reason, we're going to formally induct you into Reason. So welcome to Reason from us. Just go ahead and give us a short little blurb about yourself, maybe a minute long. Tell us what you do, what you stand for. Yeah.
Okay. I'm an atheist. I am a ethical humanist, which I think is a really progressive way of looking at morality and the progression of people working together. I'm an engineer by trade. I hope to run an engineering research firm eventually. I have a lot of projects that are being worked on. That's a different subject again. I'm 6'9", painfully white, and very male. What else do you want to know? I play League of Legends. Yeah.
Oh, so you're a gamer too. What systems?
Gamer, I could barely say. I play like 4 games at any given time, and it's basically all on PC.
Okay. Well, we officially welcome Dear Lucum to Reason, and we hope that you stick with us for a while and help us this not only prove the negative, which is fairly easy to do, but also to show people that the atheists are not everything that they're cracked up to be, and that we can be good people too, and we can change the world, and we have the potential to. So, with that being said, we're going to go into our main topic tonight, which is there an afterlife? So, when we have a topic, I usually just tell you what I think right away. So, short answer for me, no, I do not think that there is an afterlife. But that doesn't mean that there isn't one. I just haven't seen any evidence for an afterlife. So, what I'm going to do is kind of go over sort of the theological perspective in a sense, but it's going to be specific to Christianity, and Christianity is largely silent on the topics of an afterlife. You would think that something that important would be very prominent throughout the entire Bible, but it's actually not as much as you would think. So shout out to our viewers on YouTube. We have quite a few people over there. We've got Set Sudica, Persephone66. How you guys doing? All right, so I believe that the afterlife was conceived of, not in Christianity, but long before any religion probably was, simply because we have a fear of dying, but more importantly, people look at life as living when there's also another way that you can look at it, which is avoiding death. So if you think about it in those terms, avoiding death, it makes sense that we would create this idea of an afterlife, because it's kind of sad to know, it's kind of sad and depressing if you dwell on it, to think that, people like your family members, I mean, even recently with the Pope saying that pets go to heaven, it makes people kind of sad to know, once you die, that's it. But that can also be a good thing, because accepting the finality of life can make you a much better person in most cases. So the thing is that consciousness has never been observed outside of your brain. And the thing about consciousness is when you begin to develop consciousness and develop intelligence and self-awareness. Then you also a sense of self-preservation accompanies that. And as I said, that's the fear of dying. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the Bible doesn't tell us much about heaven or hell. It says a few things, like in the Old Testament, that heaven will be here on earth, and in the New Testament, it's more along the lines of people will rise again, like their bodies will come back, and it tells us that there is no eating in heaven. The Bible tells us that in Romans. In Paul's letters, we learn that there's no sex in heaven. But other than those main things, which people were very curious about, hey, am I going to get to eat my chicken parmesan in heaven? Am I going to get to bone my wife in heaven? People were curious about that. And those are the main things that they wrote about. They didn't actually write about the sophisticated, conceptualized version of the afterlife. So most of what we have on the afterlife was brought about by imagination and fiction, which is interesting to say, but other fiction influenced our ideas of the afterlife in Christianity. So at the time of the Old Testament, as I said, the prevalent belief was that this Messiah was going to come back and set up shop on earth, and he was going to rule forever, and that's the way it was going to be. In the New Testament, there's kind of this idea that you die, you get a new body, and you go to heaven to be with Jesus and God. And there are problems with this. Like I said, the Bible doesn't specifically say what heaven or hell is going to be like. And while I'm at it, none of the Abrahamic religions actually do. So let's talk about hell, for example. Hell is not a biblical thing. Hell was kind of added in much later. It was, culturized and plagiarized, etc. So hell is not biblical, and in the idea of hell being a place of eternal torture for human beings was derived sometime around the 15th or 16th century. And the thing about that is the only place in the Bible where hell is depicted as a place of eternal torment is in 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4, where it talks about the angels that have sinned will go there to be tormented forever. It says nothing about humans going there to be tormented. And the Old Testament is largely silent on the issue of hell. Specifically, they only talk about Sheol, Hades, which is the grave, or Tartaru. And then there's also Gehenna, or Ben Hinnom, which is the valley outside of Jerusalem where they burned babies and did all kind of pagan rituals. So anyway, there are problems with the afterlife. One is that we don't have enough information on it based on this scriptural perspective. So that's an issue when it comes to discussing the afterlife. There's also the idea that in heaven there will be no evil, there will be no tears, and this kind of alludes to the fact that you may not have free will in heaven, which is another philosophical argument entirely, but the basis of it is that in heaven, if you can't sin, because sin is a byproduct of free will, then you must be a robot. If you can't cry, you must be a robot. If you went to heaven and your son went to hell, that's your son, you're going to cry. But the Bible tells us there's no tears in heaven. It's just joy and righteousness. So the problem to me with that is that if this so-called God could have created a place where there was no evil in the first place, then why didn't he do it? And that's one of the philosophical arguments against free will. But the other aspect of it is that if God did create this place where people could go and there is no evil, then ultimately, because he created the earth and he created hell, he created a place where evil could run rampant, then he's ultimately responsible for every single person that ends up in hell, if there was a hell. But as I mentioned, hell is not biblical. And the thing that I wanted to close with is that in eternity, doing anything is hell. There was a really great quote that I heard. It was something along the lines of, this guy was saying that he couldn't stand being in church for 3 hours, and if if heaven is like church, that would be hell for him. In essence, everything would be hell. Think about doing something over and over, the monotony. I mean, you could do everything that there is to do. You could learn everything that there is to learn. And what happens when you're done? What happens for the next trillion, billion, quadrillion years? So that's what I'm going to close on. In eternity, doing anything would be hell. The Bible is what I was talking about specifically, is largely silent on the issue of the afterlife, and so are the other Abrahamic religions. And if you want to speak specifically about Judaism, or what they believed in the first century Jews believed, they just believed that there was going to be heaven here on earth. So I'm going to close with that. That is the biblical theological perspective on heaven and hell, which is very interesting. So I'm going to turn it over to the godless engineer, unless you guys have any questions on that.
Well, hello again. Tonight I'm going to be talking about basically what we can replace with heaven. A more realistic look at the afterlife. And basically, you really got to think about what kind of supernatural being would you really expect there to be, or would you really want to serve? Because I mean, that's what we're talking about here, is passing on from this life into an eternal existence of constantly thinking and constantly being aware of yourself. So in this eternity, what kind of supernatural dictator do you actually want to serve under, right? Because if the religious are right, at least as far as they know now, that's what the afterlife would be like. Is you've got this supernatural dictator that rules over you and basically determines whether or not you burn forever or you live in peace. So, would you really want to serve or live under for eternity a god or a supernatural being that doesn't merit good works? So, like, if you lived your life completely and you did good things for your fellow man, for yourself, if you do that and you die and you find out that there's a god, do you really want to live in an eternity under someone who's not going to recognize that, who's not going to be merciful enough to recognize, the good things and the good impact that you left on the world after you left it? I mean, if that God were to send you to hell for simply not believing in him, then maybe that's not a God you want to serve under for eternity. But then again, if you live your life like completely full and you do good works, and you help your fellow man and you leave a positive impression on those around you, if there is a God, hopefully he recognizes this, and he allows you through the pearly gates to serve for eternity, whatever. But if there's not a God, then what are you risking? Now, what I have been describing is commonly called the atheist wager, which is sorely penned after Pascal's wager, that Christians love to use so much. If you're not familiar with Pascal's wager, it's basically saying that you're not losing anything if you believe in a God, so you might as well believe in a God. Well, there's a lot of problems with that, because are you sure that you're worshiping the right God? If you don't worship a God correctly, then he might just go ahead and send you to hell anyways. So I mean, there's a lot of problems with Pascal's wager, but what I'm talking about and what has been named the atheist wager is that you live your life full and you do good things and you don't worry if there's a God or not. If he's if you get up there and he's not going to recognize your good works and the positive impression that you left on people, maybe you don't really want to be in his presence for all of eternity. But if you live your life and you do good works and you you leave a positive impression on your fellow man, and on your loved ones, on people that you know, just leaving a good impression in general. What have you gained? Well, you've gained kind of an afterlife after you die, because when you leave this world and you die, and basically your energy dissipates into the universe. I mean, you're people are going to remember you for a time. If you're lucky and you do certain things in your lifetime, you'll be remembered for long after you're dead. But the most that any one of us can really know is that we'll be remembered by our friends and family for some time after we die. And I think that should be the focus of someone's life, is leaving a positive impression on those people, and really presenting yourself to the world, to our reality, the way that you want to be represented. That way, when you die, people can remember you for the person that you are, for your mannerisms, for things that you said, and to leave this world and to leave that positive impression on people I think, is just about the best kind of afterlife that you can hope for. It's not a conscious kind of afterlife or anything like that, but I would say that it is an afterlife that's worth working towards. To know, before you die, that people are going to remember you for your good deeds or for the good things that you've done, for the people that you've helped. To know that some of the people in your life wouldn't have as long of a life that they've had without you. I mean, to know these things before you die is, if you really think about it, is quite spectacular. So that's pretty much my spill on it, and I guess Brendan is next. Unless there's any questions from ALS or anybody else.
All right, thanks, GE. Yeah, I mean, I'll just start out by saying that I personally don't believe that there's an afterlife. And the reason that I don't think that is because clearly your consciousness is housed within your brain. We have no evidence of any consciousness existing outside of a physical brain. So if there was some sort of soul or something along those lines that existed, where would it exist? I mean, you can look at somebody who has brain damage in a specific area of their brain, and they might be in a coma, or they might be, in a waking state, but they don't have all their faculties about them. So, that kind of demonstrates that your consciousness is housed within your physical brain. And so that's why I don't think that you would go on existing after your brain ceases to function properly. I don't see any reason to think why it would be any different once your body dies than before you were conceived. You didn't exist for billions of years before you came to be, and I don't see any reason why your post-life existence would be any different. Certainly there's different takes on the afterlife in different cultures, different religions. For example, some people think that you might be reincarnated and come back in a different form in another life. That's something that's part of Buddhism or Hinduism, and there's differing thoughts about it. But maybe if you weren't such a good person, you'll come back as like a lower life form, or if you were a really good person, you might come back as more of like a godly figure. There's also, like, in Norse mythology, they didn't really have as much of like a moral aspect to the afterlife. They had things like Valhalla, and they even had an afterlife called Hell, which was actually spelled Hel. And that's kind of what lent its name to the Christian version of the torturous afterlife. Because, like Aeolus was mentioning earlier, there's really no mention of hell in the Bible itself. Kind of our idea of hell today comes from works like Dante's Inferno and Paradise Lost, and it's more of like a pop culture thing. If you actually look in the Bible, you won't see anything like what most people consider hell to be like these days. Certainly, the Old Testament, what the Jews believed, it was just It was not anything like heaven or hell that the Christians believe in. And to that end, I just kind of want to go into why the heaven and hell of Abrahamic theology is irrational and unjust. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that a God would punish people for not believing that he exists for the 70 or 80 years they have here on Earth, maybe even less. You'll be tortured infinitely for the rest of time because you didn't have enough evidence, or maybe you were just ignorant. Maybe you didn't even hear about this God. And so for that, you'll be tortured forever. But as long as you believe in this God and you apologize for any of the bad things you've done, no matter how terrible it is, then you can get to a life of eternal bliss after you die. And that just is unjust, and it's irrational. Think about something that I like to bring up a lot, especially in the abortion debate, is think about when a zygote comes into being. A sperm meets an egg, and a lot of people think that's the start to life and that has a soul and all that. Well, at least 30% of the zygotes that come into existence, they never even implant into a woman's uterus. And so you mean to tell me that they get to immediately go to heaven without ever being born or anything, and the rest of us are supposed to jump through all these hoops and meet all these standards and just to get the same reward? It doesn't make sense. It's illogical, really. And if you just look at the concepts of heaven and hell within the frame of Abrahamic theology, it's clear when you read the Bible that heaven is supposed to exist just beyond the Earth's stratosphere. Things like Jacob's ladder or the Tower of Babel. They reach up to the heavens, and they were saying that these people were getting close to actually reaching heaven. And we've put people on the moon. We've sent robots to Mars. We've sent probes into interstellar space. I mean, clearly heaven is not just beyond the earth, as is described in the Bible. And then when you look at hell, again, what little is in the Bible kind of references actually earthly places like Gehenna or Tartarus and things like that. And then if you actually were to go with the kind of mythological hell, clearly that exists underneath the earth, below the earth. And you can understand why they came up with this, because they were, looking at volcanic activity with all this fire and brimstone shooting from beneath the earth, and they were just kind of hypothesizing what must be under there. And it all kind of relates to, Hades and Greek mythology, and they drew influence from that as well. And the last thing I want to mention is, a lot of people, they spend their lives kind of working towards an afterlife. They kind of waste their lives away on this promise of an eternal life after they die, and that's kind of their focus. They want to ensure their eternal fate, so they kind of throw this life here on earth away because of that. But this can be harmful for other reasons as well. I mean, you look, the Pope, I mean, just recently he told a young boy whose dog had passed away that his dog is now in heaven, and he went so far to say that all creatures can go to heaven, all God's creatures can go to heaven. And that's ridiculous, first of all, because that kind of, again, it's like, okay, so you mean to tell me that all lesser life forms and human beings automatically get to go to heaven, but we're tasked with the responsibility of having to do, meet this standard in order to get to the same place? That kind of just drives home the point that heaven is there as a place of comfort for people, so that when they lose loved ones, whether it be an actual human, a family member, a friend, or even a pet, a personal family pet, they want to feel that comfort to think that they're now in a better place and that they might be reunited with them in the future. And then another way that this can be harmful is there was just that woman recently, just this past week in Kansas, who actually stabbed her 10-year-old son to death because she said that he would be better off in heaven. And, obviously that's not going to be something that's a regular occurrence among people that believe in heaven. She might have even had mental issues to go along with it. But at the same time, without religion, without the belief in heaven, does something like that happen? Maybe not. And then, to make it even worse, you have the father who finds out about this, and then he says, yeah, I do agree that my son is in heaven, but obviously I miss my son, and this is a tragedy and a horrific event. But, again, he's just at a loss, he's grieving, and at the same time, he's still under the impression that his son is actually in heaven, which is the reason why his mother killed him. So, believing in afterlife can definitely be harmful. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Unless you guys have any comments or anything, I'll toss it over to Data Lucum.
You did mention consciousness there, so I wanted to kind of touch on that for just a second. So we really don't understand consciousness as much as we would like to, but with the advent of the popularization of neuroscience, perhaps we will one day. I think primarily the issue comes in, especially when you're talking about pets that go to heaven. All God's creatures can go to heaven. Um, what kind of creatures go to heaven? Do mosquitoes get to go to heaven? But there's no death and suffering in heaven, right? Is AIDS considered one of God's creations?
Let me just
Does
say that
AIDS
if
go to
everything
heaven?
goes to heaven, I'm surely signing up for a dinosaur ride in heaven. I think that would be a good PR campaign for the church. So,
Hey man, I don't think that would be too fun. But I'm gonna quit wasting time and hand it off to Dieter.
It's just a comment on along the lines of consciousness. We can like take away what we kind of recognize as consciousness from people through through chemicals or lobotomies or things like that. So at the very least, we're pretty sure it's in the brain somewhere.
Well, we don't know that they've lost consciousness though. Maybe they aren't able to express consciousness. What if they're still
Data
experiencing
gathering.
consciousness? It's kind of, you know.
It's everything that we would consider that makes them human is housed in their brain and is connected to their body in some way. So when both those things are dead, we really don't get much. But anyway, so my entire little monologue was going to be about experiments and things we've actually done to at all try to verify an afterlife, and how every single one of them failed. This starts with one of the original experiments, whose name escapes me because I did very little preparation for this. When people were doing experiments on whether or not a soul leaves a body, they literally measured a dead person as they were dying, and they said, like, I believe 6 grams or like 6 ounces or something was not accounted for. Like, you lost weight the moment you died. And what occurs to me is why they didn't measure all of the other gases that were leaving the body. And maybe that accounted for that. And that's kind of the problem with a lot of these experiments, is most of the variables that people try to measure, they don't measure correctly or identify correctly. And a lot of the times, the terms people are trying to use, they don't actually know what they mean, which makes me very much question if these are actual scientists doing these experiments. This falls into every single experiment ever done on near-death experiences. On that very term, this is near-death experience. No one actually died. If you had a near-death experience, your brain never died. So that's the biggest issue that I always have with these experiments, and how like anyone that does them doesn't seem to get it. I was reading an article just before this where it just started. Okay, so Duncan McDonnell, it was early 1900s. Thank you, Prototype Atheist. And lost train of thought. All right, there was a guy that was doing some experiments that was just like, a person was brain dead and still had a near-death experience. No, they weren't. Or no, they didn't. Those terms don't mean what you think they mean. But along the lines of the actual experiments people have done, normally they'll have a monitor or some kind of card or placard that is placed really high on a shelf or in another room, someplace where the person that is dying on the chair or getting a near-death experience will not be able to see it. Every time these experiments have ever been done, they are either inconclusive, the experimental procedure is so terrible that you can't even determine what data you have. For example, you take, after the person wakes up afterwards, you take their deposition or whatever their statement was months or years afterwards, and human memory being as horrible as it is, that information is worthless. And that being said, the few experiments that people have done, the people just don't know. They never see it because they were never told that it existed. Except in one experiment where I think 2 out of 100 people actually saw the placard or whatever, or they saw an experience, or it was just they were positive in the experiment. And it turns out that those people, they forgot to set up the monitor, and they took their testimony months after the event. So that data is worthless as well. So what we have right now is like no positive data that anything happens after you die. An afterlife could still exist, but at this point we have no real reason to think that there is one. And that was most of it.
So I have a question because I kind of looked into this a little bit. For you guys probably don't know because we don't really talk on a personal level like this. But my mother was in a coma for a while, and right now she's in a brain dead state. So I did a little bit of research into this because obviously it was affecting me, and I was interested in it. And I found that there are some people out there that have these stories where they have documentation that they were brain dead, clinically brain dead, no brain activity whatsoever. And some of them actually came back and like woke up from this and recovered and were able to say things like what they saw and things like that. Do you have any comments on that?
They weren't actually brain dead, and the way that they measured it was bad. That's the one problem with it's kind of like brain dead by definition is absolutely dead. So if they woke up again, they weren't actually brain dead. I know it's kind of fiddling with definitions, but that's kind of the problem. Is we're really bad at this point in fully understanding when someone is brain dead. They could still have spinal cord activity. They could still have activity in parts of the brain that you're not actively measuring at the time. It's kind of a bit of a cluster, like in that way of identifying this information. But what makes it more poignant is there's a lot of like commonalities in near-death experiences that we can replicate through other means. Like, I think oxygen deprivation causes a very similar effect when it's like you feel like you're being lifted away from your body, you see like light at the edges of your vision, and then your entire vision becomes white. We can induce that effect in people. So it's not magic. It gets even more like obvious to me at least, because depending on your culture will basically determine what you think the thing you saw was. It's not like people in India are seeing Jesus. That's not happening. It's always whatever religion they were brought up in. And that just kind of screams to me that this is all just conditioning mixed with just physiological reaction.
Yeah, I was actually going to kind of add on to David's or Dieter's monologue here, and say that when you're coming out of this quote unquote brain dead state, you don't exactly know like what's going on inside the brain of the individual that's coming out of whatever state that might be. So while if you're measuring the person's brain and you're like, oh yeah, they're totally brain dead, like they've got no activity or whatever in their brain, when they actually start waking up, there's no way to tell if they have that experience as they're waking up, like as they're coming out of it, or maybe they had it like as they were going into it. And it got converted into long-term memory, or maybe it stayed in short-term memory, something like that. Either way, these experiences, there's no way to tell if they happened after, like, the person is quote-unquote brain dead, or if it happens in the stages before or right after they wake up. So that's all I was going to add.
Yeah, if I could just interject here, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that our technology is so advanced now that we can keep people alive on machines. We have like life support. Whereas before, people that would just be it. They would eventually just expire. Their body would cease functioning. But now we have the ability to keep people alive a lot longer, even if their body is failing. So I think it makes it a lot tougher. And we don't fully understand the brain yet. We don't understand where consciousness is. We don't understand, what does brain dead mean? Like he was saying. So sometimes we might get it wrong, or maybe it's just not a uniform standard for actually declaring that. We used to, the medical community used to consider your heart stopped beating for a specific amount of time to mean that you were dead and that was it. And we know now that that's just not the case. Your heart can be revived after a long time of being stopped, and if you can get the blood flow going again, I mean, your consciousness and everything is controlled by your brain. So we still don't really have a clear-cut idea of what exactly all happens, and everybody's different. That's the thing, is a lot of times people forget to think that everybody's not built the same. We're all individuals. We're all unique. Our bodies are put together differently, and so what may affect somebody one way might affect another person in another way. So trying to declare when you're brain dead can be very difficult. As far as near-death experiences, I'll just kind of go ahead and agree with what was said already, that people tend to see things that are familiar to them. So a lot of the times people claim to see dead family members, and a lot of the times they claim to see the God that they believe in, that's culturally significant or familiar to them. You're rarely going to see somebody that's not a Christian saying they saw Jesus, or somebody who's a Hindu saying they saw Jesus or something along those lines. I'm sure there's cases like that, but then again, how do you know what you're actually seeing? Because nobody really knows what these deities look like. Nobody really knows what Jesus looks like. They all have this idea in their head, but that's just based off, again, of popular culture and of paintings and things of that nature. And again, we can also, like was mentioned earlier, induce these kind of effects in people with oxygen deprivation and things of that nature. So, your brain can do funny things on you, especially when you're nearing death, when your body's not functioning properly, and you might be thinking that you saw things or heard things that you really didn't see, that were kind of figments of your imagination. We all know that eyewitness testimony isn't the most reliable, and then just imagine that under the conditions of your body failing. So that's pretty much what I had to add to that.
Yeah, so what you mentioned there is that people tend to see what they're familiar with, and they tend, you don't hear about a Muslim seeing John Smith, you don't hear about a Jew seeing like, a heavenly version of Jesus. This is kind of interesting anecdote, but not really too relevant to the discussion. When I was in the military, I overdosed on DXM, and I was in my bed in my dorm room, and I kind of had like this kind of sort of, I guess, like a near-death experience where Jesus actually laid with me in bed, and it was a white Jesus. Because that's what we tend to see, and this Jesus, not very surprisingly, if you know enough about me, was like fucking ripped, man. He had like abs and shit, and they were like all veins like popping out of him, and
Wait, hold on. Did he lay down beside you and he was like, "Sup, bro"? Oh.
Well, there's a little more to the story. Like he wanted to tell me, he was disappointed in me and stuff like that. But anyway, that just kind of goes to add on to what you guys were saying. Oh no, Dieter, no. No comment. But yeah, so consciousness. Here's an interesting thing that I find about consciousness, and you learn this very early on in psychological studies, is that there seems to be a separation between the brain and consciousness, even though that we can assume, and as far as we know, they are tied together. They operate separately. Your brain is taking in all this information at all times. Dieter looks like he wants to interrupt there. Let me finish this. So your brain is all the time taking in information, whether you're awake, asleep, unconscious, whatever. It's always taking in all this information. And your brain actually dictates what information you hear, see, taste, touch, whatever, is what is going to be the most relevant for the situation. So it kind of seems like, to me, that your consciousness is sort of a separate entity. I mean, like we said, you can't separate the mind and consciousness, because we know that when a person dies, they have no display of what we would define as consciousness. But just something to think about. Peter?
The comment I wanted to say was no. but then you kind of corrected, you kind of clarified, so I'm not going to be that rude. I was rude before, it's fine. The way I've always described it is consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, in the same way that you could say that like gravity is an emergent property of matter, even though that comparison is not quite adequate. But you get what I mean, is when you have a brain and you have enough neural connections, the properties that mind can produce gets more complicated and more interesting. The reason that we are so crappy at really recognizing the difference between our observable understanding of things around us and the way we see our own brain or whatever is because we're on an inappropriate scale to really appreciate it. It's kind of, I think I mentioned this at some point before, but it's like I can't push my hand through my hand. And that's because I'm not on a quantum level that I can move in between atoms. I'm hitting the atoms together. But my consciousness is on an even bigger scale than that because I can't even comprehend cells. So the interactions of the billions upon billions of neurons in my brain are able to produce patterns that I recognize with that same brain as my consciousness. And this is why I kept bringing up stuff about when the brain is damaged in some way, the very way that you view reality changes. Like, I have depression. Some shit goes down when I have a depressive episode. And that's because my ability to comprehend my surroundings changes. And it gets even more ridiculous when you fire hallucinogens into your brain. And it gets even more crazy when parts of the brain are damaged or removed. There's like different brain disorders. Which brain disorders are the best way we have to study this kind of phenomenon? Because you study what part of the brain does by what happens when it's missing. And it's just like split brain patients, nominal aphasia. Like, there are so many disorders that are just bizarre that we, as our normal functioning brain people, we can't even understand what it would mean to be unable to say nouns. Like, what does that even mean?
One of
But
the
that's
things
what the brain does.
One of the things that I like to bring up when you start to have this type of discussion is that, because you kind of went another way with it there, but so we see the sky as blue. But is the sky actually blue? No, it's not. But our brain processes this information into our consciousness. It gives us a blue sky. We know that the sky is not blue. We can test this. We can use the scientific
This
method.
is where the terminology is important. It's not that it feeds it into our consciousness. It's that it's added to it. Our consciousness is not a separate thing. It's just the way that the consciousness is the sum of our ability to perceive things. Those parts of those abilities can be removed and modified.
I can agree with that. I had another experience where this doesn't have anything to do with deities or anything like that, but it kind of has to do with the brain and how it processes information. So at one time I was bouncing, and when I was bouncing this one night, I was wrapping up, and there was actually a blind guy walking down the street with his cane and his seeing eye dog. And I wasn't paying attention, and I was kind of moving around, and when I turned around, like, I almost bumped into the guy, and I'd like dived out of the way in the last minute because I was, kind of a big guy. I don't want to knock out this blind guy. So on my way down, I noticed that this blind guy dived the other way to miss me, and this was a while back, but it kind of made me start want to research this and find out like why that is, and it kind of has to do with the brain. And just because your eyes are blind and your brain is not processing that information from your eyes, and then it turns out he was a superhero. So they're not blind, they're just unable to process the information that you say adds to the consciousness. So his consciousness didn't see me, but his brain did. What do you think? I'm fighting really hard here to maintain a separation.
This gets into the idea of the subconscious and conscious mind. And that's a complicated one.
Yes, it
Because
is.
I almost define like the conscious mind as the thing that both writes and reads our subconscious. The way that I always bring it up with people is like, think of a country. Okay, you have a country in your head, everyone? You all have countries? Where did that country come from? Where did the idea for that country come from? It just appeared in your brain, didn't it? Or was connected to a series of memories, or was connected to a thing you saw recently. All of that is your subconscious, and your conscious mind retrieved it. So you can actually have like really interesting like subroutines going on in your subconscious when you're observing different things or feeling different things that your conscious brain can sometimes grab onto, and other times not even close. This is why like people that seem to have like supernatural like completely physical powers of perception or whatever, they just spent a hell of a lot of time focusing on their senses. It's nothing special. It's just impressive.
Okay, I was gonna disagree with you there really hardcore, but what you're saying, as you clarified, it makes a lot more sense.
That's right.
The subconscious, shut up. The
That's right.
subconscious
Superheroes exist.
is always aware of everything, and I've had experiences like this too before, where like something was said, like off in the background, and I didn't hear it, but later on somebody said something to me and mentioned something, and I was like, hey, I did hear that. So what you're saying is
You want to be
my consciousness tapped into my subconscious to
Do you
obtain.
want to hear something just ridiculously trippy about human perception?
Yes, tell it.
There are more nerves going from your brain to your eyes than your eyes to your brain. I think it's like 40 or something % of things we see our brain is creating. Like your peripheral vision and all that stuff, it's not actually there. Your brain is putting it into your vision.
Yeah, that's a really good point because we actually have a blind spot in our eyes, which I'm sure you guys know, and like your brain just makes that up, like what's supposed to be there. And like you said, like your peripheral vision, like your brain is just using clues from your environment and from experience to kind of fill in. Like, so you're actually seeing stuff that doesn't exist, but you're perceiving it as real, which is crazy.
Also,
We're going off into like a completely different realm here. I'm really disappointed right now that we don't have like Sam Harris and like Deepak Chopra here to like have a debate with us. But, I mean, this is real. I enjoy talking about this stuff, but it's very interesting, you know.
You can't
another
talk
example
about
is
the afterlife without discussing consciousness, because
Oh,
that's what
absolutely.
people think
Yeah.
is the afterlife. Your consciousness goes on, and you remember all these people. So it's we are trailing off like Dieter intended us to. I'm sure he did, but we're still discussing something relevant.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to try to rein it back in a little bit with an interesting connection. Speaking about the subconscious, the processes that go on in there, and how ALS, you were saying that you could hear something, off in the distance and not really be conscious that you heard it, but then recall it later. These are the kind of things that you need to consider whenever you hear near-death experiences. You need to consider the fact that while these people that say, oh no, I floated above my body and I saw there were 3 paramedics working on me, and then we got into the ambulance, and then a girl with a giraffe stuck it in my face. I don't know why she was in there, but hey, she was in there. When you hear these kind of things from near-death experience people that are asserting it as, oh yes, there's a verifiable afterlife, you need to consider the fact that maybe they knew about these things without actually consciously knowing about it. Kind of like with that Heaven is for Real movie. With the Heaven is for Real movie, you had the little boy that died, and then he had this near-death experience that, it was a white Jesus up there in sandals and everything, and of course, the general picture that you get when you have angels, and of course, he went to a church that he knew. These were all things that he had been previously exposed to. So, when he comes out of it and he's like, oh yeah, Daddy was screaming at God in the sanctuary and blah, 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 blah. Well, I mean, you don't know if maybe he just figures that's where his dad was, or maybe the kid heard his parents talking about it without even knowing it. Those kind of things. So that's why we can't really use near-death experiences as valid evidence for an afterlife, because you can't separate out what you've subconsciously heard or processed from the things that you consciously experienced.
And something that Dieter was mentioning there, he was talking about depth perception and how our brain creates that, and how our brain tends to create all these visual cues for us. Brendan mentions the blind spot. And the important thing to remember here is that your brain is constantly working to make sense of your environment. And though your eyes may be closed or you may be unconscious, your brain is still doing that. So if you can hear 3 paramedics working on you, and you know that you could hear subconsciously a doctor came in, you can recall this information, as Dieter likes to say, tapping into the subconscious. And maybe that what happened there was that the brain created this, took all this information, compiled it together, and created this experience that was a very real experience for them. It did happen to them. But ultimately, I still think that near-death experiences are bullshit, even though I've had one. But there have been studies that say that DXM is released in the brain, and that could be one of the causes of these near-death experiences.
I think one of the more, like, I wouldn't be surprised if it could have been like because like I found out recently with like terrible sleep problems I had that like there being light in the room when you're asleep and your eyes are closed still can mess with your sleep patterns. So like you take on like a huge amount of data even when your conscious brain, whatever you want to call that, is doing other stuff. But it's just ridiculous. So I wouldn't be that surprised. Some of the medications we're given when we go under, we might actually feel all the pain, like our body feels all the pain from surgery or whatever, but we just forget about it when we wake up. That's trippy.
That's true. Here's something that I also wanted to bring up to you is that I'm sure you saw on Big Think maybe a couple of months ago where they were talking about how eventually we'll be able to upload our consciousness to a computer. So if they are able to do this, they're speculating on it, but it seems like they have a good idea of how they're going to go about doing it, and they actually separate consciousness from the brain. What implications do you think that is going to bring about, besides the fact that you may not be able to experience any more external stimuli?
I think we're misjudging how important the subconscious and the connection to our human bodies is to our consciousness. For all we know, if we remove just our consciousness, it won't even be close to us. It'll just be like a weird, like when you have robots in like video games or whatever, they're just like decision machines. It's just like, oh, situation arose. This is my response. Like, for all we know, that's the only thing that will ever happen, because if we don't have sensation, if we don't have all of the senses that are just in our body, we won't have any senses because the brain doesn't really feel anything. So yeah, I don't really think that'll work. It won't be, whatever gets taken out of your brain will not be human.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I don't think that would even be possible. I don't even know what that would mean. I mean, I don't put it past science. I mean, we do crazy stuff. I was just watching a video the other day of the guy, the first guy who got, the first, bilateral shoulder length bionic arms, like basically, and he was sitting there controlling them with his brain, which is insane to think about. But I don't think you could upload your consciousness to some, like a hard drive or something, or to something else. That doesn't really follow to me. Something that's really interesting to think about is the fact that if you didn't exist as you, would your consciousness exist? And what I mean by that is say there was a different one of your father's sperm that met your mother's egg. Would your consciousness exist in that, or would that be a completely different person? I tend to think that it would be a completely different person. It's kind of trippy to think about, but you know what I mean? You only exist in you. Your consciousness is only housed in your brain, and nowhere else. You can't be in two places at once. It's just something, interesting to think about in that way. And I think that's why a lot of religious people try to tie that to like a soul, because it feels like you're so unique and you're just only inhabit your own body. But it's definitely something interesting to think about.
So wait, you guys are telling me that Johnny Depp movie is not possible? My whole life is ruined.
Like, the only way I could see it working is you basically replace everything the human has. Like, all of their organs, all of their cells, basically. Basically, if you just make cloning. Just make cloning. That'll do it.
But does that guarantee you that you're going to have the same consciousness? I mean, I guess if you could transfer it into that body. So what happens if you do a brain transplant? What happens if you did a brain transplant, a successful brain transplant? What happens? Like, it's questions like that.
It would be a person, but it wouldn't be you anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's kind of a different case. I mean, but yeah, now that I think about it, we have identical twins where, like, literally the zygote split into two separate people, and they clearly have their own consciousness. And that's just one example. So, yeah, I don't think it would be possible to, like, actually put your consciousness into something else, because an example like that just kind of demonstrates that, where you're coming from literally the same fusion, the same genetics and everything. And in cloning too,
But if consciousness is a product of the brain, and you do a successful brain transplant, is it or is it not?
No, but all of your senses influence your brain. So if those senses are different in any way, then what your brain does is different.
So what you're saying is that the consciousness is not going to carry, like, everything that all your memories and things like that will not carry over.
I think the memories probably will carry, like, that stuff would, but the way they're interpreted, the way that you're, like, we don't know exactly how much your body-brain interaction matters. I think the only way that it would be possible is if you made a perfect atom-by-atom clone of your body, took that body's brain out, and put your brain into it. I think that's the best way I can think of doing it.
Because, I mean, just thinking about it, I would think, like, just think about how, crazy it would be to take the godless engineer's brain and to stick it into my body. And what would that mean?
Perfect man.
No, I'm that already, baby. I'm just kidding. But what would that mean? What would that mean? And to me, I just think, like, I mean, I think logically, if you could do it, if it could be successfully done, that everything that he knows and experience would be in my body, but now he would have a different perspective. But I don't think that he would lose his consciousness or who he is, the godless engineer.
No, that's the thing. I think they would. And I think that's the problem. Is because, like, the way that the sensation we get from our body is, in part, the way that we interpret our own memories. So, like, if our body was completely replaced, the various hormones that get flooded into our brains would be different. The signals we get from our sensory organs would be different.
That's true. Godless engineer would be much more horny with his brain.
That's lovely. Thank you. And you don't.
I thought the movie Freaky Friday already answered this question for us, so I don't even know why we're bothering debating.
Yeah, Professor Lohan is just the foremost person on switching bodies, so I don't know.
On the Freaky Friday example, if they wanted to make it accurate, all that would happen they would just freak the fuck out, and they would just be like babbling idiots. Like, imagine if every single sensation you have ever had suddenly changes all at once. Your brain
I can agree with you on that.
It's time for a really, really long nap.
I think that your brain, because it's like we've said previously in this podcast, is that your brain is constantly trying to make sense of what's going on and to put it in a totally unfamiliar environment. it probably would go crazy. But I think at the end of the day, this is just me personally, my opinion on it. I think it would still be you when you recover from this craziness, if you can recover from it, if you can take on all these new senses. Um, it would still be
You would
you
be
at
a
the end
different
of the
person.
day. It would definitely change you.
Well, me
I don't even know if
personally,
you can call yourself you anymore.
But does the
well,
godless engineer become me just because his brain goes into my body? There's another question that
No.
boggles
No,
the
that
mind.
that's probably the big question. Is like how much influence does body have over the brain? Is it total influence? Like, are we just a sum of our sensations, or does the brain actually do something specific by itself?
well,
So
my
that's a
take,
good question.
my take on this particular subject is that if you were to successfully transplant a brain, I think that the change would be gradual, but you would experience a shift in your personality and on the large your consciousness. Um, I think that over time you would inevitably change how you react. Um,
Is-
I don't think that it would be like an immediate thing, which I don't think Dieter was saying that. I don't think it'd be immediate, but I do think that over time, as you perceive things differently, that in turn is going to change, how you act and basically change your consciousness. So I don't think that it would be like. I'm sorry. You go ahead, Dieter.
Actually, I would say both. This is why I'm saying like the radical. This would basically be like going on the most intense drugs you've ever been on in your life, because you're basically dropping your brain into a vat of unfamiliar cocktail of different proportions of different hormones. So it would be immediate, and it would be terrifying or awesome.
It would be pretty bad, I would think. I mean, just think about, like you mentioned, the hormonal differences, but I mean, think about all of the other things that affect your brain at the current moment and apply that to this specific
Hmm.
situation. It would just be,
It,
it's
I
unimaginable.
definitely would say the gradualness that G said probably would happen also. Wait, GE? You're not GE. Yes, you are. I don't know who people
He's
are anymore. Shut
GE
up.
from GA. There you go.
Ah, words. Acronyms?
Sure.
But yeah, I
Okay,
do
so
think
we
the
have a
gradual thing
couple.
would happen as well when your brain basically deals with it, assuming the brain isn't rejected or dies instantly from the magical cocktail of drugs.
So we have a couple comments on this question. Is there an afterlife? So we're gonna go first with Gloria Perona Marti over on the Philosophical Atheism Facebook page. She says, "No, death just makes us a part of the bigger picture. We become a part of this earth again and help to feed it. That is all. Yes, you were created from stardust, and to this stardust you shall return. The continuation of life in the universe." It's very poetic and very
It's
can
also
it can
accurate.
yeah but it can be. We mentioned before, you can have emotional investment and just thinking about things like that. I cried watching Cosmos. I'll just throw that out there, man. I was crying like every episode just because it's just so freaking poetic and it's just so amazing that people often overlook that you can have that emotional investment. You don't need a religion to have an emotional experience. Any
Of course, I
comments
would
on
agree.
that or no? Mike Shank, extremely unlikely we survive death. Define death, Dieter.
Um, it depends on how you define death, because technically, like I always make the joke about like resurrection of Jesus or whatever. It's just like we resurrect people all the time. It's called a defibrillator.
What
It's not
about his
impressive
what about
anymore.
his resurrection of Lazarus?
Defibrillator.
He went in and performed
There's also like
CPR
back
on
at
him.
like you remember death bells of like the 17 and 1800s? Like
Yeah.
people were buried alive so often that they had to have bells installed so they could say, "I'm actually not dead. Anytime, dig me up."
Yeah, and the
Like,
reason why they installed them was because they were digging up like graves. I think it might have been grave robbers or something, but they were digging them up, and they would find scratch marks on the inside of coffins,
mhm.
and that was the indication that they were actually burying people alive. So I
You
think
know
that
that. And, go ahead.
I think that's where they get the term graveyard shift from. Also,
There's also a term that GE you're probably familiar with since you're from the South. Setting up like a funeral at the thing where you put the body out. They have a viewing of the body like before they actually do the funeral. They call it
okay,
a setting up, and it was called a setting up because back in the day people used to actually sit up and wake up and like, hey, what are y'all
Like, hey
doing?
guys,
Hey,
what's up?
why is there candles lit and why are there pictures of me? And why are you guys looking at me all crazy like you just saw a ghost? Don't run! Where are you
Yeah,
going?
actually, where I'm from, they actually
I'm
call
not
it a
dead
wake.
yet.
They
The
actually
wait.
call it a wake, the thing before the funeral, because, yeah, I mean, they would actually like let somebody sit there for like 3 days in case, they would wake up because,
We're pretty sure he's
back in the
dead
day
now.
before they actually embalmed people, at that point they're obviously not coming back, but that kind of tradition just kind of carries on of viewing the body and all that kind of stuff before you actually bury a person. So that's where it all comes from. It's all tradition.
yeah. I was
I,
gonna say
I'm
I'm
loving.
not that southern that they call them standing ups. That they're pretty much called wakes down here too.
I'm loving the chat right now. Setsuke is like gives a new meaning to Saved by the Bell. I'm not
Oh
dead
man.
yet. I
Ring,
feel
ring, ring.
happy.
Okay, so let's move on to
Monty
these
Python.
last couple comments and then we'll head over into the hypocrite of the week. We've got League of Melee on Instagram. He says, no, there is no evidence for an afterlife. I think that the fact that so many people think that there is an afterlife makes people not live life to the fullest. I agree with that. What do you guys think?
Well, the Bible Reloaded actually has a pretty interesting take on this, and I believe it was either Hugo or Jake, of course, but they used basic economics on the whole afterlife issue, and that's like you have this minuscule amount of life, and then you've got this ever increasing eternity that's afterlife, right? And so by the fact that this supply is so high in the afterlife, it really devalues, what life you have here in this reality. So I think that, it definitely does devalue your life, believing in this eternal afterlife. But I guess that's just me.
Yeah, there's a saying, and I think it might be from Dostoevsky, possibly. And it basically he said that our life is like a sliver of light that separates two eternities of darkness. I mean, it's literally inconsequential when you consider like an eternity before you existed and then an eternity after you die. So really, what does your life mean? And I know, I don't want to, make it seem like people that believe in an afterlife, they don't have any purpose in their actual life, but it really does tend to devalue it because you're just kind of looking forward to that and doing what you need to do to ensure your fate after you die. So, and another example going back to kind of how this can be harmful is like I know for sure, like in 18th century Denmark, and I bring this up a lot too when this topic comes up that in order to get around this idea that if you committed suicide, you couldn't go to heaven, people would literally commit murder so that they could repent for the murder before the government then executed them. And then that, in their mind, then they could go to heaven. So, again, another example of why this type of thinking could be harmful.
If you need an example of afterlife beliefs being harmful, the entire concept of reincarnation, like the caste
That's true.
system, is basically saying, "Oh, you're only in the untouchable class because you're a bastard and deserve it."
Yeah, and that kind of comes
And
up too in other ways.
I'm royalty because I deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
No doubt about that. And there's people that think too that like they'll be punished if they do wrong things in this life. There was I can't remember her name. I think she was a singer, but like she had a child with autism, and she basically blamed like having an abortion earlier in her life on why her child had autism. So these kind of things are not really. They're not really don't make sense, and they're not positive at all. Like, why would this innocent child be punished for something that you did previously? It's not logical, but people believe it.
No, it's not that the child is being punished. You're being punished with the child
Right.
because children are
Right.
autonomous
Apparently,
beings; they're property.
Okay,
Did I
moving
actually?
on.
Yeah.
CT Atheist on Instagram says, an afterlife described in absolutely not. However, I feel as though having an idea of an afterlife that could be beneficial to us. Every person is entitled to believe that they will go to some special place after death, but basing your life on the premise is wrong because it strips you of the only life that we know exists. I personally live my life with the premise that I will be forever gone when I die. That should be the only position. Live this life the best way possible, and whatever happens after life happens. We've kind of basically said that for the whole podcast here. It
There's
appears
one
Dieter
phrase.
has something.
There's one phrase that I've liked, and it's like, no one who thinks that there is a bigger life after this one has any right to make public policy that influences the life we live in right now.
I'll go one step farther and say that anyone
That's-
that thinks that future generations will not be here should not be influencing public policy. Such as people that think that Jesus is going to come back tomorrow, and therefore we need to just, destroy the earth and do all this other stuff.
Or, politicians that think that autism is divine punishment from God for homosexual marriage.
I heard people say directly that there is no need to worry about global warming or any other things because Jesus is coming around anyway.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that global warming. God is the only one that can change the weather. So and besides, He's coming back anyways. He's gonna rapture us. It's like, no, come on, this is not a horrible Nick Cage movie.
This is kind of why, I partially disagreed with the beginning of this comment. I think it's extremely important that we consider what people believe. Even if they don't live their lives in accordance to that belief, it still influences how they do live their life.
Yes, I say that all the time. It's the basis of the psychological aspect of this, which is that what you think and what you believe manifests its way into your actions.
Well, and as I recently found out with my interview on the New Age movement, even the smallest belief that you don't think can be harmful has the possibility of even being harmful. So, I would completely agree with the fact that it's a very important subject.
If you want to tie this back into consciousness, we can also say that these beliefs, like say someone says, oh, okay, well, I don't like Hispanics, but I don't go out there and promote this. But if on the subconscious level they don't like Hispanics, what level of their consciousness is actively doing things against Hispanics or discriminating against Hispanics without them actually perceiving it as them acting upon it? I know Dieter wants this one. It's kind of a rhetorical question. You don't have to. I'm just.
I didn't actually. I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, perfect. We can move on to the next comment. Bobby Carto says, there is something in me and in you. It's in everyone. We can't see it on paper, but you feel it. You are there. Your thoughts, your feelings, only you can see, hear, and feel. It's in animals. It's in trees. I don't know what happens when we die, but I believe that this thing inside you never dies. There is only one of everything to ever exist. The world is timeless. The universe is endless, and it's all alive.
That kind of sounds rapey in my opinion.
Consciousness rape.
Yeah. Well, and also, that seems like a threat there at the end. It's timeless. Where it's everywhere. It's like, oh my goodness, what are you gonna?
Kind of sounds like The Happening to me. He's trying to say that trees and plants have the consciousness and stuff. I mean, are they gonna send out their pheromones or whatever and take over our minds? I mean, should we be afraid? Yeah, I just honestly, if there is some sort of afterlife or existence after our bodies cease to exist or continue functioning, whatever. I'm not worried about it, honestly. Honestly, like we kind of mentioned earlier, the thought of existing forever seems horrifying to me because what do you do? Eventually, at some point, you would accomplish every single thing there is to do, and you would be bored. You would have nothing left to do. And a lot of the times, people that believe in like an afterlife or in heaven and things like that, they try to say, well, without heaven, your life doesn't have purpose. And then I kind of respond with like, well, if you exist forever, then what's the purpose in that? Because eventually you're going to have no purpose. You will eventually do everything there is to do. And I mean, but if that's the case, so be it. I just see no evidence for it, and I see no reason to believe that that's going to be the case.
But God
Hey,
can just reset you. He can just reset you. Once you do everything, he hits the reset button.
I'm tapping out, man. I didn't ask for this. I'll take the one life that I got. I'm cool with that, and then I'm tapping out. All right. So I don't need to be reset.
Don't piss God off. Don't piss God off. He'll send you to heaven and not hit the reset button, where you have to be on one knee for an eternity, worshiping, praising, and glorifying Him.
Are we NES systems? Is that what we've been reduced to now in God's eyes? We just put in a cartridge like, oh, this is the John Gleason cartridge. Yep, I'm going to play him for a few years.
According to the Bible? Yeah.
How do you know that's not happening right now?
Could we spin this into like an atheist hell would actually be heaven? Like, would that actually
you think
work?
It isn't?
We'll go to heaven because for us that's hell. So.
That'd be a great
We'll
meme.
get there anyway.
It's like everyone truly does go to heaven. The believers go where they want to go, and the atheists go where they don't want to go.
True story.
All right, let's move on because okay, we're gonna change this policy next week on comments because we don't have time to read all the comments on the air, so we'll select the best ones and read them. So I'm gonna go through these really fast, and then we'll just hit a discussion if you guys want to afterwards. IG Atheist says, after being clinically dead, I still believe, and there are some proofs, that there are a few days or weeks that you're thinking or dreaming, not much of an afterlife, but it could be something. Die with Dignity says, there is not an afterlife due to a simple fact. The only way to have one is if people had a magical spirit or equal to go to the afterlife. But as I say, we will all find out, and at that point, it will be too late to discuss it. You probably won't find out because if death is the death of consciousness, you won't know. Ronnie Mondile says, I believe in reincarnation. Good luck, bro. I hope you don't come back as a mosquito or a virus. Dr. Chinfat says, have you seen the documentary about the boy who was reincarnated and remembered his past life? I don't remember what it was called, but I found it on YouTube. Dark
It was
16.
a pile of bullshit. Go on.
Dark 1602 says, I believe it would be cool to have a Valhalla at the end. I know there's nothing, but it would be nice to have something to look forward to, I guess. And Dogs Not Dead says, you should talk about quantum soul theory. I personally don't believe in the afterlife, but the theory is interesting. I don't know a whole lot about that theory. The only thing that I know about it is that no. This is actually a theory. Not like evolution is a theory.
It's a crappy hypothesis.
This is a theory in the general usage of the term, not the scientific usage. So I know it has something to do with, we die, our consciousness goes to another universe. Is that it? Do you know what it is, Dieter?
I could be completely wrong on this, but it's the same idea of like matter can't be created or destroyed, so your spirit has to be something and just transferred somewhere else. We have no idea what it would be made out of. No one has demonstrated it's made out of anything or that it actually exists. And the idea that we're like quantumly entangled with something else, that happens on a quantum level. A spirit would not be on the quantum level if it existed at all. So it's just complete gargled like woo talk.
Yes. Well, to pull from something that I heard from Brian Cox, you really have to sit back and you think like, well, what is life? I mean, what makes living things animate and move and live and think and process all the information that's coming in, and that's energy flowing in and being processed and then being pushed out. So, I mean, when you die, what happens? That energy dissipates. It moves on elsewhere. So, I mean, if you want to think of, like as far as the law of thermodynamics goes and whatnot, that matter can't be created or destroyed, so it's got to go somewhere. Well, that's kind of partially true because you have this energy that is flowing constantly within you, and then when you die, it just you don't process that energy anymore. I mean, like the energy that is in you, like that is still in you, like your body fat and all that kind of stuff, that holds energy, and of course you decay, and that's how that energy gets transferred. So I mean, there's energy conservation all around whenever you die, is what I wanted to put out there.
I think that it is just like an hourglass. Your life starts, and it starts going, and when that sand runs out, that's it. Now, as much as we'd like to be able to flip it back, it doesn't work like that. And until we have a better understanding of consciousness, we have to go with what we know right now is when you die, that's it. We have no evidence, as Dieter says, that anyone has ever come back from the dead. The dead, so not the brain died or my heart stopped, but the actual dead, which you died and you were
When your
dead.
cells start rotting.
Yeah, you were rotting and you came back. We don't have any evidence of that.
All zombie-like.
Well,
So I just have
supposedly
to.
when Jesus was crucified and he died, the graves opened up and many zombies came out and they were seen by many.
Yeah, no one mentions that part where there was a freaking zombie attack on the town. No one talks about that story.
I
But
like
whatever.
how that only has one verse. Like, come on, you didn't think to give us some more information on this? Like, were they attacking people? Were they like shooting the shit? Like, hey man,
Do you know
I've
what
been
it
in
could
the
have been?
grave for like 2 years. Can I get a
It
drink?
could have just been a mass, like the doctor of the town that wasn't even close to a doctor declared like a whole large group of people dead that weren't actually dead, and they all just were kind of like, "Can you let us out, please?" And then the masses of the people walked out of the grave, back to their families.
All right, we've got the last comment here, which is official AJ. I don't believe a supreme powerful being has anything to do with believing that we have some force power that runs our bodies to make us work the way we do, and that energy can live on, maybe not the same way it did when we can live on cognitively. As you can tell, we're going to disagree with this, and GE actually just talked about this energy that you're speaking of and how this energy dissipates when you die. And I want to point something out here is that no, and afterlife is not synonymous or necessary to have a belief in a God. You don't have to believe in a God to believe in an afterlife. But I'm noticing something with atheists, especially on social media, is that atheists tend to be so skeptical of religion, and it's like the opposite as it is with theists. They're not skeptical of these other things. Oh, our consciousness may go on when we die, or there's some energy, force, power that runs through us, and when we die, it functions cognitively. Like I'm noticing that they tend to be so skeptical of some things, but not others. And it's kind of like how it's the opposite of the theists who are so skeptical of everything else except their religion. What do you think, Dieter?
This has to do with all the stuff about perspectives, and of course, people that if they've been told their entire lives that this thing is absolutely true, then they're going to believe it, and they're not going to question it. That's the point. If anyone questioned their religious beliefs, they won't be religious anymore.
Brendan? That was the last of the comments. Do you have anything you want to say about the comments?
Well, I'll keep going in the interim. The one thing I wanted to say was when G was here, and he's not here right now, but gargled nonsense about energy. That's not what energy is. Energy isn't actually a thing. Yeah, you, man.
Well, yes and no.
No. Okay, so energy is defined as the capacity to do work, and work is defined as the capacity to use energy.
Well, that's why I
So
said
energy
yes
is
or
just the
no.
label we put on the potential to do something. It's not like energy actually leaks out of our bodies. It's energy is
Well,
the label we give for when stuff turns into other stuff. So it's not like you actually say that your spirit is a capsule of energy that floats out of your body. It's the chemical bonds between your cells break down, and that is dissipated as heat.
yeah. Sorry, I did not mean to make it sound like there's this flowing magical energy force or whatnot flowing through us that it dissipates or whatnot. I know I said dissipates, but by dissipates I mean it transfers, and it doesn't. Our bodies don't take in new material or take in new stuff to process into to do that transformation. That's all I meant. I didn't mean to cause such a upset.
You know, Dieter's got to have his specifics. So we're going to go ahead and move on into the hypocrite of the week. So, let me go ahead and give the introduction. It is time for the hypocrite of the week. Okay, that went a little too long. Try not to do that one again. This week's hypocrite of the week is going to a group of faith-healing parents who let their child die from a treatable form of diabetes and decided to pray instead of getting their child treatment. And we're going to name them the hypocrite of the week. We're going to discuss why after we play this short video. But we're also going to talk about the positive side of this, if there can be a positive side to someone's death. So we'll go ahead and start that now.
Coin 6 News this week.
Oh, they hit me with another ad.
Just into the Coin 6 newsroom this
Wow.
Wait, I got us to
Jenny Hansen. Coin 6 News this morning.
All right, don't forget to mute so our audience can see the video.
convicted of manslaughter in the death of their 12-year-old daughter were each sentenced to 10 years in prison in Lynn County. And they believe in faith healing, and their daughter died after not getting medical treatment.
Well, Tim Becker was in the courtroom for that sentencing, and he has more from Albany.
The courtroom was full of friends and family of the Rossiters. It was mostly silent as the judge read their sentences. That came moments after Winona Rossiter's tearful statement. Winona Rossiter broke down as she and her attorneys asked for leniency from Judge Daniel Murphy.
This has been very hard for Winona, and the trial itself was very difficult for her, and it wasn't a surprise to me to see her emotional.
She and her husband Travis were convicted here last month of recklessly and negligently causing the death of their 12-year-old daughter Sybil, who died from a diabetic condition after not receiving medical care. They're members of the Church of the Firstborn, some here today, that believe in faith healing. 3 years ago, Oregon changed its law to exclude spiritual treatment as a defense against all homicide and manslaughter charges, meaning parents like the Rossiters are now subject to mandatory sentencing under Measure 11, which Judge Murphy did impose despite the defense attorney's efforts to exclude applying the stricter sentencing.
It treats everybody the same, despite the fact that everybody is not the same, and that somebody who intentionally tortures a child is going to be treated the same as a mother who is a good mother in all respects, but because of religious beliefs hasn't provided medical care for the child.
The Rossiters had argued that they thought their daughter had the flu, which is why they didn't bring her to a doctor. But the state argued it was their responsibility to be aware of the girl's health problems.
I disagree with the judge's sentence, but I do understand that he felt constrained by Measure 11.
The Rossiters began their 10-year sentences immediately after leaving the courtroom, followed by friends and relatives who said nothing to myself or other reporters. In Albany, Tim Becker, KOIN 6 News.
All right.
At
So,
Code 6, our mission is simple.
guys, what do we have to
All
say
right.
about
So
this?
how much cursing are we allowed to do on this show?
As much as you'd like.
Fuck those people.
Yeah, we talked about an important point earlier in this live stream, and that is that when you believe something and you think that it is true wholeheartedly, it manifests itself into your actions. And this faith healing that they thought that was the way to go, even though it is demonstrably not working, and we've seen this in the past 5 years, all of these children dying of treatable illnesses, they're still doing
Two
it
died in
anyway.
my town.
Two
kids
died
died
in
in
your
my
town.
town.
How old were
Yeah.
they?
Like children, like very young. And it's from the same church.
So yeah, so this week we're doing a different type of hypocrite of the week. Normally we take a hypocrite based on usually the biblical perspective or the Quranic perspective and show why they are a hypocrite. But this week I'm going to name them hypocrite of the week because they failed as human beings. Faith healing is the bullshit. Okay? GE, I know you got a necessary hard-on for faith healing. I've heard you talk about it before, so give it to us.
Well, I have to say that there is no symptom of diabetes, either high blood sugar or low blood sugar, that could be mistaken in any sense for the flu. I mean, that's just ridiculous to me because I have diabetes. I've had diabetes since 2006. Well, okay, I had it way before then, obviously, but that's when I was diagnosed. And generally, I mean, like, you know, when you have high blood sugar, you usually run kind of hot. Not that you have a fever, but you just feel hot. And, you know, you usually have to pee a lot. You're drinking a lot. And so, you know, it's not like anything that's flu related. I mean, sure, they might feel hot or something like that, but that can't be the
It's a lethargy could be a thing. She could have been hot and not wanting to get out of bed. That's possible.
Yeah, true. But I mean, if she was running high, like, I don't know how she died exactly, either low blood sugar or high blood sugar. Like, if she was running low on blood sugar, she definitely wouldn't be wanting to move or anything like that. If she was running high on blood sugar, she would be tired. She would want to sleep. But, I mean, is that really, like, a symptom of the flu? Like, being tired and having to pee all the time? I mean, I really don't think so. And as far as faith healing goes, I do have... I hate to play devil's advocate, but on the one hand, see, every time I see a faith healing thing, there's always two abuses that occur. Okay, there's of course the abuse of the child, and that's horrible. I mean, for them to be negligent about a child. I remember when my son was born and he had a slight fever when he was a baby. I freaked out and I wanted to go to the emergency room, but you know, I had other adults that I could contact and ask about it, and they calmed me down, and we were able to get his temperature down. But you know, I care so much about my son that if he were to get any kind of you know, medical situation that I don't feel can be handled at home, I would be the first one out the door to rush him to the hospital. And that would include the flu, because you don't, I mean, just because it seems like the flu doesn't mean that it is the flu. So it's always good to get checked up by your doctor. Also, the other abuse that I'm talking about here is the abuse of the parents. I mean, the parents themselves have been abused. They've been abused into thinking that praying to the magical rapist in the sky will heal you of all your wounds. or all of your symptoms and everything. I mean, they've been indoctrinated into that. They've been abused into that way of thinking. That does not give them any kind of leniency, though. That does not exclude them from being held responsible for their child's death. But it is important to recognize that there are two abuses that have gone on here to create the situation. There's the abuse of the parents, and then there's also the abuse of the child that they abuse themselves.
I would like actually.
Well, and I feel.
Go, Preto.
Sorry, yeah, no, I feel like this is hypocritical, and I'll tell you why. It's because, most likely these parents actually believe that their daughter is now in heaven, in some state of, never-ending bliss or whatever you want to call it. So for them to be upset is hypocritical, because what's terrible about that? What's so wrong about that? I mean, it's only natural, to be grieving and to be upset, as a human being, as a person. And obviously, as us as atheists not believing in an afterlife, we can understand that. But it's hypocritical, because if you really think she's in a better place, then what are you so upset about? I mean, honestly, as far as faith healing goes and all that, I really don't have any tolerance for it. It's not an excuse. They should not get any special exception for it. This kind of underscores why children themselves are not religious. A parent might be of a certain religion, but a child is not of a certain religion until they get to an age where they can declare themselves and make that decision on their own. I know there was a case before in the UK where there was Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were refusing to give their young child, I mean, we're talking like 1 or 2 years old, a blood transfusion for some procedure that they needed to save his life. And they actually, got involved in a legal case, and the judge pretty much ordered them to have the procedure to get the blood transfusion, because the child cannot possibly choose to be a Jehovah's Witness. I'm pretty sure that if the child had the opportunity to decide, they would want to continue living rather than just go by these arbitrary rules that their parents have set for them. It's just a simple fact. They've done studies that prayer is not effective in these situations. And so, we can't allow these exceptions at all for quote-unquote faith healing, because the science and the record shows that faith healing is directly proportional to the current state of modern medicine. And so it's not God doing anything, it's the medicine doing something.
Well, I'm in full support of giving them the 10-year sentence, and possibly more, because we need to make a statement to these people that if you want to do faith healing and you're a consenting adult, to me, that's fine. If you want to pray your disease away, that's fine. But you cannot do it to children, and you cannot do it to anyone else. You can't force that on someone else. And as Prototype Atheist mentioned here, it was a child, and if she was given the opportunity, she would probably want to go on living. Now, specifically, I think Church of the Firstborn believes in reincarnation. But still, at the same time, like you said, she wouldn't be weeping incoherently there if she really believed that her daughter was in a better place. So, Jesus supposedly said that what you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. And if they're really a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, then they should also be holding to Romans 13:1, which says, because I love to point this one out, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which has been established. The authorities that exist that have been established by God. That judge that gave you 10 years, none of you should be sad, because God established that authority and He gave you 10 years, and you should accept that bullshit because you did some bullshit. So for that bullshit that you did some bullshit, you're going to get some bullshit. Dieter?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add to this is that if somebody is in this state of mind, I understand that it's because they're indoctrinated or whatever, but at the same time, that just screams that they are unfit to be parents. Like you can't have the responsibility of keeping another person alive if you think magic will keep them alive.
No, and I totally agree. That's why I tried to clarify with, it doesn't alleviate them of responsibility.
Oh yeah, I would say they fall into the same characterization of being a threat. It's like they are dangerous to themselves and others. But of course, that's not going to happen because religion gets a magical exception to everything.
Just about.
Now think about how most rational people would hold these parents accountable for their child's death. And we can also draw an analogy here how also most rational people will also, if a God does exist, hold this God accountable for all the suffering in the world. Just an interesting argument that I wanted to bring up there. So
It's like, why aren't they yelling at God for killing their daughter?
yeah. And I want to know, like, I want to know if they're gonna own up to this, or they're gonna be like, okay, faith healing doesn't work, or are they gonna stick by this shit? Are they gonna be like, no,
No,
it was God's
You see,
plan.
they won't. They won't, because this is the deal when it comes to the whole anti-vaccination crowd or all these various things that have a weird tie to religion. It's the idea that when you give a child a vaccination or take them to a doctor, you are basically doing something physically to your child. You are giving them medicine. You are giving them an injection. You are treating them in some way. That's your responsibility now. These weak-minded people are not able to they're not able to deal with the responsibility it takes to actually raise a child. So they have to level off all that responsibility onto their magical sky fairy. So, like, I'm not for eugenics, so I don't think that you can say that, like, all religious people can't have children. But if you have this mentality, your children should be taken away from you.
That sounds like communism.
Yeah, and it has to happen.
Damn it,
I
Obama.
agree.
Otherwise, more children are going to die.
Fucking Obama, that antichrist.
It's like I'm just so, like, irritated by this mentality, because it's just like, I refuse to take responsibility for what happens to my child. Therefore, I'm a better parent than anyone else because I have Jesus on my side. It's like, no, you're delusional and are a danger to children.
Well, for letting your child die from a treatable diabetic illness for which you claimed was the flu, and then babbled incoherently in court in some hopes that this judge would take leniency on you, after you believed that you were doing the right thing in faith healing. You should have. The fact that she went back on that and cried in front of the judge makes her a hypocrite. So even just for that minute part of the story, I'm stamping you with hypocrite of the week. But the most important thing here is that it seems to me that we're making progress with this faith healing crowd, and hopefully people like this get starved out of the gene pool, man. It's do it. Unmute and then do it. Yes. Judicial authority.
It sounds way less dramatic than you think it does.
And you got to do it on the camera, though. You got to.
It sounds even stupider.
Hypocrite of the week. But really, like, if you really thought that you had done the right thing, you wouldn't be crying in front of that judge. It's ridiculous, but I'm happy to see that they got. I'm not happy about the situation, but this will serve for future generations and people in the future that want to use this faith healing as an excuse to not take their child to the doctor. This may deter them from doing that, and for that, some good has arisen out of this situation.
Hopefully. Now there's precedent.
Yes. Okay, so you guys go ahead and do your advertising, spam your links and stuff, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Brendan, you want to go first?
I don't know if he's still here. Oh, he is.
No, I'm here. I was just had my camera off there for a second, trying to conserve battery. My battery's almost dead. See what you guys do to me. I'm Prototype Atheist. You can find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. I'm approaching 1,000 subscribers, which was my goal for the end of the year. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter, and see what I do there besides what I do here every Sunday night. So come on over, check it out.
And I am the Godless Engineer. you can go onto Facebook and type in Godless Engineer or Godless Engineering, and you can find me there. I have a Facebook page as well as a group, and it has several subgroups that are attached to it. You can go there and you can find me, join our group. We just surpassed 10,000 members, so we're pretty stoked about that. Over on my YouTube channel, I have a few series that I run weekly. There's church signs where I go around my local area and I film myself in front of church signs making fun of them. And then there's the Did Jesus Exist discussion that I hold pretty much every Monday. I release a new video where I state a new contention against the historicity of Jesus. And then on Fridays, it's fucking Fallacy Friday. So I record myself doing hilarious logical fallacies in an attempt to educate people on the finer points of fallacies. So join me there on the YouTube channel with all my various series stuff that I do, as well as check me out on Twitter and Instagram.
Hello, everyone. I'm Data Lucum, the most attractive of the skeptic round table, or whatever this is called. Oh, I completely lost my train of thought again. I do YouTube stuff. You can find me at Data Lucum at YouTube or whatever. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook. I am woefully less popular on Facebook than GE, so fix that, all of you people. Yeah, do that. I'm awesome. I'm also, as I said before, I'm going to finally start doing the Godless Voices podcast with a friend of mine from around here, and it's going to be, if an indication of our conversation today is at all what the conversation is going to be like on the show, you'll enjoy yourself. You can find that on godlessvoices.com, or it is .com, godlessvoices.com. It'll be up soon. The website's up, but the show will be up. You can also find other people's material on Godless Voices. I hope to actually make it a full one-stop shop for all atheist media on the internet. That'll be fun. So that's all I got.
All right, so as you guys know, I am your host, Aeolus, a.k.a. your favorite atheist. Can you hear me? You can hear me? I can't see me, though. I wonder why.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay. Pretentious dick. I'm Aeolus, a.k.a. your favorite atheist. If I'm not, I will be. You can follow me at God Works Out. I'm also on the Facebook pages, facebook.com/philosophical-atheism and facebook.com/religionhurtshumanity. You can also follow me on Instagram. I recently started one. It's at God Works Out. Other than that, you can find me at the Secular Round Table. We have nice things over there like T-shirts. Should I show them the T-shirts again? In case you weren't watching in the beginning. We've got the Rational T here. Oh, man, that is so, I like that. Look at that. Oh, it's got that nice fabric to it, too. So, yeah, anyway, you can go over there. You can go over there to thesecularroundtable.com and check that out. If you'd like to support us, you should consider doing so via Patreon, patreon.com/reason. We have a lot of philanthropy-related projects over there and the milestones that you can check out. If you consider becoming a contributor over there, we'll also go to things like helping Brendan, the prototype atheist, get some new video editing software, because Lord knows he needs it. Also, shout out to our sponsor, the one and only Atheist Box, the monthly subscription box designed just for you and only for you, for atheists and non-theists. It's all about promoting positivity and the understanding of science without bashing and trashing religion, which I can personally stand for. You get little neat things in the box like this Bill Nye t-shirt, Do You Even Science? So to me, it's great. I have a review on my channel of the very first Atheist Box. If you'd like to check that out, you can do so. The video is on my channel. And as a godless engineer says, think skeptically and stay godless. As Brennan says, keep calm, it seems legit. As Dieter Lucum says, well, he doesn't say anything just yet, but we'll find out later. since he can't even get the name of our show right, probably should give him the boot for that. But as I always say, guys, we really appreciate you for watching, because this segment is actually, these segments, the reason the Secular Roundtable Live Show are actually, they get the lowest view count, but they actually have the most minutes watched. So we appreciate you guys for doing so, and thank you for watching. Reason.